Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's panel discussion. The discussion today is going to focus on reinventing the medical legal regulatory or MLR review process through a data-driven approach with the purpose of making it more efficient, effective, cost-effective, as well as more compliant. I'm Vashita Dikshit, and I head the medical and compliance review practice at Indegene. Joining me today are three industry leaders in the MLR, as well as medical affairs, as well as medical strategy space. I'll let them introduce themselves. Renu, can we go ahead with you first?
Sure. Thank you, Vashita. So I am Renu Juneja. I am heading medical affairs operation team at solid tumor at J&J, Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine. So I was part of the core team that worked on really revamping and rethinking the MLR process at J&J. So I have been this close to my heart. And of course, I have been also keeping an eye on what is going on in the industry regarding this process. So I'll pass it on.
Thanks, Renu. Gareth, do we have you next?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Gareth Worthington. I am the head of clearance at UCB. And for us, this means all content across the entire company that may represent a risk externally, as well as all of the technological governance, and future-proofing of systems and processes. So it fits very nicely with today's discussion.
Thanks, Gareth. Georges?
Hi, I'm Georges Tramutanis with Takeda Pharmaceuticals. Up until last month, I was heading up medical review, medical information for Takeda Oncology. And as of now, I joined the Data, Digital and Technology Group, focusing on medical affairs. So definitely a lot of synergies with my colleagues, and looking at the MLR process is very critical to what we do.
Thank you so much, and welcome again, panel members. So just to get started, we know MLR analytics can be used in multiple ways. They could be predictive in nature, wherein we could analyze past data to predict the outcome of the reviews or to identify bottlenecks. They could be a powerful decision support tool. Visual dashboards can help us track progress of the review and can help us make informed decisions very quickly. And they could be used as part of continuous improvement initiative as well. So let us hear from you all as panel members how MLR analytics could be used to make the whole process more productive, and also to ensure that we reduce the error rate, increase the quality of the communication that goes out in the market. We would also want to go a step further and try to understand how you have used analytics within your settings, or how industry uses it in general to probably implement newer resource models, or to also to integrate technologies, or to evaluate the outcomes of some of the transformational practices that are being implemented in this space. Yeah, so let's get started. My first question to the panel members is, how do MLR performance benchmarks impact MLR operations, and how do they overall align to the organization's goal? Maybe Georges, if you would want to take that question first.
Of course, and thank you so much for the introduction and the question, Vesta. I think it is very critical to understand that MLR process is a pillar of the organization overall. And then we look at how do we align to the overall organizational goals. I'll go through the main one that I feel, which is launch excellence and speed to market. As you know, as we go through the process, we try to optimize how long do we take to investigate a product in the clinical setting, and how quickly can we launch. And when the critical moment comes and we have the approval from the authorities, it's very important for us to really optimize the time and really be able to deliver materials of high quality as quickly as possible. Also, as we look at the organizational goals, we feel that the alignment across regions and countries is something that we can really enable. As we create materials across a global level, it is through the launch process, it will be very important for us to be able to share and reduce materials, so we limit the amount of work regions and countries can do, and again, speed to market with materials that are high quality will be critical in the success of the overall organization.
No, amazing points. Thanks, Georges. Anybody else would like to add? Renu, probably you.
Yeah, sure. So, I think MLR is a critical step, right? Because we can generate all the data we want or best data, but if we don't communicate it effectively in scientifically sound and fair balanced way, then, it's not reaching or it's not making the impact we want it to make, right? It's like producing a great movie, but not releasing it at the right time or in the right theaters, right? So communicating data out effectively is very, very important. And of course, MLR is a step in that way that, we review and we approve, resources or decks or tools for our field force to go and communicate, right? I think analytics and benchmarking is important, but I have also seen it's being overused or over-focused, right? Kind of thing, because every therapeutic area has its nuances and every company has a different way of, communicating or guidelines and things like that. So analytics and benchmarks are important, but I would, request and suggest to keep the context of the therapeutic area in mind. And of course, your company's framework in mind, so that, it doesn't, like, it's not a one thing that happens across the industry or across all therapeutic areas, right? And other thing also is really looking at, what is important in this whole process. And I think keeping end in mind and making sure what is the objective of MLR, keeping that in mind and making sure we are meeting that business objective as we are looking at analytics and benchmark.
No, it's so awesome. I think I'm hearing similar kind of views from you, Georges, as well as you, Renu. So having an effective MLR process could help ensure that the right impactful, meaningful, critical information is reaching out to the audience in the timely manner and in the most consistent way, Georges, to your point that you mentioned, right? Whether it's in the global or different local markets, it's consistent, and some great points are coming out. Now, my next question to the panel is, what are some of the key sources of data that organizations typically track to effectively govern this process? And Renu, since you answered the last question, would you take that as well?
Yeah, I think there are different ways or different, analytics and different metrics or data that we can look at, right? But I would like to focus on a little deeper on the cycles of review or the timelines of review, right? So I have seen many times that a submission comes in, right? And you look at that submission or that deck or resource or tool, and it's way off. Is way off, right? So and you have to send it back to make significant changes. So in my mind, in that case, that submission should not even be considered as accepted, or that timeline shouldn't start, right? And it should go back and make sure that when these submissions are coming in, that they are meeting the MLR process guidelines and principles, right? Only then the clock should start. And if this is happening too often, which happens when you come up with a new revamp process or you change few things, right? People are trying to kind of understand and get on board with the new process or new way of working. I think it's very important to also, think about it. Do we need to go and train submitters to mitigate this happening again and again, right? Or looking at things and saying, do we need to train them? Do we need to answer some questions so that people are confused about some MLR process principles or guidelines and things like that? So I think that's very, very important to consider, that when does actually a submission timeline starts, and how do we mitigate that so that people are not making similar mistakes over and over again? Right?
That's helpful, Renu. Anybody else? Probably Gareth, would you like to add on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think training is a huge part of it. We use a combination of analytics, UCB. So, for my team specifically, we look into the workflows in the Viva system or whatever system that we're using. understanding cycle times, review times. We're looking at the global to local reuse of content, how that happens. But we're also looking at things like the quality of content that's being submitted, error rates, that kind of thing. And then the org chart, who is submitting content, who are they, what are they doing? And with that combination of things, then we can really understand, whether it's a problem in the system, is a problem in the training, is it, where is the issue? And frankly, it's led to a huge reorg and a rethink for us about how we're doing end-to-end content creation. So it's definitely important.
That's awesome. And I think I'm hearing two themes over here, I guess, quality and timelines, right? So quality, probably it's your rejection rates, the submitter submitting it in the right way versus first time right. And on the timeline side, I definitely hear the cycle time, the number of review rounds. So I think these two seem to be the most important data people are tracking. And then obviously the outputs or the results of tracking this data could be multitude. It could be ensuring the right capacity in the team versus, training the people who are actually doing the submission or creating content. So wonderful. Now, my next question around the same topic is, are there specific parameters or metrics that are generally not tracked in the whole data analytics process, or are not easily visible, but they can provide critical piece of information that could help in improving the MLR process, but more importantly, improving the whole outcome of the MLR process? So any views on that, Gareth, if you would like to go?
Sure. I mean, for me, MLR is as much of an art as it is as a science. And so, one of the big ones is risk tolerance, right? It's something you can't really track that well, but it impacts the MLR process massively. So really, you can have two different teams look at the same piece of content and come to two different conclusions about how risky it is. So really setting the risk tolerance as a company, who do we want to be? What level of risk are we willing to tolerate? Will drive things. And unless you get that right in the beginning, that can really cause issues. And that can also differ above country and below country, right? At country level. So the regional or global team might think something's okay, and then you get all the way to the Nordics and realize their legislation, can be interpreted to be more strict and then it causes you problems. So it's for me, it's the risk tolerance, I think is the key one that's not trackable, but important.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Gareth. I think that's at the heart of a whole MLR process, right? We are, especially regulatory and compliance or legal colleagues are looking at, what is the risk, right? And I have seen, and the couple of companies I have worked at, that we do MLR process at the country level. So like in US, the MLR process is focused on US. And basically the thing is that different companies have different regulatory requirements, or the guidelines can be little different from regulatory agencies. So we do MLR at the country level. So I have been mostly in US side, US-based materials are reviewed at the US level. So that, our compliance officer, legal or regulatory are actually very well versed with regulatory requirements in the US, right? But you hit the nail on the head, that is that it is risk assessment, right? And it is so subjective. I think the real question is, how do we make risk assessment more objective, right? Rather than giving answers yes or no, it's like, okay, this is the risk with this because of this, right? If we know why it is, risk is high or risk is low, not only it helps educate people who are coming to MLR with their PCs to get it reviewed, but also teaches them how to handle it going forward, right? So I think I totally agree that risk assessment, and we do sometimes get answers yes or no, and that question should be no. It's a high risk, it's a medium risk, it's low risk. And as Gareth said, different risk levels, different companies have different risk levels, right? So making it objective and really knowing that why that risk is, I think will be very helpful.
I think also from my side, something that we don't always measure but impacts MLR is the time taken before MLR. I think at times, I think all our teams are always stressed with time, reviewing 3 days, 4 days, 2 days. And this is where the pressure comes. That's the highest risk for not reviewing a story like it should have. And then we talk to the business owners and we tell them, how long do you take to generate the content? It was 4 weeks and 5 weeks. And then you understand that they don't carve out the necessary amount for the review process in their projects. And that just puts a lot of the time pressure to our teams. So I think what we try to do is also try to measure what happens before MLR to help improve the MLR process overall, as we now request from the business owners to have the time carved out that is necessary for an effective, high-performance MLR review process at the end of the cycle.
No, so amazing and very interesting, especially the points that I heard from you, Renu, as well as Gareth. The risk assessment, and also the reviewer's ability to justify that content can be very subjective. And if things are subjective, it's difficult to track it. But then tracking it can be highly useful, especially in the outcomes point of view. To the point, Renu, that you made, that why is this a risk and what could be done to mitigate it and how do we handle it? Are we ready to handle it? And Ajwa, just the points that you mentioned, especially around how much time the content teams who are creating content are taking versus the time that is being given to the reviewers to assess that level of risk, the level of compliance. It's very important to track that aspect as well. We've now spoken about the parameters. I'll try to switch gears and ask you if you could provide examples of how a data-driven approach has directly led to improvement in MLR outcomes, anything within the industry or within your setting as well. And I would like to hear from all three of you, because I'm sure this would be very useful to our audience. Anybody who would like to go first? Jordan?
Yes, I can go first. I think there are some very easy wins we come through the data-driven approach. For example, in our organization, we looked at a very simple metric, which is look at how many meetings that we have been canceled. And so what we've seen actually is if the majority or a huge portion of the meetings have been canceled, do we need as many live meetings as we currently have? So that led actually to having a reduction of the overall meetings we have to review, the live meetings we have to review materials. That was an easy metric, but also an easy win because everybody appreciated time given back and how do we best improve the operational element of the MLR process and the MLR meetings. I think further to that, we also try to see the resources. I think the team, Gareth and Renu also mentioned before, the resourcing can be a challenge. And so looking at the data, looking at potential bottlenecks, and if you have an MLR process and you through the data-driven approach, analyze and see that a specific function takes a bit longer than everybody else to review, is not pointing the finger who is to blame, but maybe they're not resourced appropriately. So that gives us the opportunity to investigate, talk to the functional heads and see, okay, we're seeing this pattern. Can we help the team and maybe give more resources to help them to be better at reviewing at a timely manner together with the other functions? And I think in the future, I hope that we'll have more predictive and analysis and prioritization being automated a little bit by the new technology and Gen AI, whereby based on the historical data, the time it took to review materials, the resource impact it have, will be the better place to predict how long do we need to plan ahead to be able to launch in a specific date. And then also the resources that we would need based on the potential for materials created so that we can have a timely and effective MLR process for the launch of new products. But that's not there yet. But I think that's something we definitely want to see, how Gen AI can help the operations and the predictability of the MLR process.
Yeah, I know we are all wishing for that, the North Star, where we have enough time to continue with the review. Renu, go ahead, please.
I think AI genie is already out of the bottle. We're not going to put it back. We just need to adapt and accept and work on it, right? But Vashita, I would like to just touch on three things quickly that George has talked about. First, that, the content creators take weeks, 4 weeks, right? Or more sometimes before they come for submission. And I have seen it over and over in all three companies I worked at, that the piece comes in and it's way off, right? It's just not what it needed to be, right? Or significantly changes and all. So my question is always, should we just have a quick conversation on the outline or even on the, proposal that we are talking about, especially if this is for the first time, right? We want this to be proactive. We haven't seen the examples of that before in our MLR process, or we want to consider this in the, our unmet need, that, you have a conversation at the concept level rather than go and spend 4 weeks and then figure out, no, this is just not going to fly, or you need to focus on different things, right? And the second point is, I still have to hear of any company that says, oh, we have enough people on our MLR team, we have enough resources, we have enough reviewers, right? So then it is on all of us to think, how do we streamline it? How do we make it effective and work better? Do we have separate reviewers for commercial pieces and separate for medical? Or, or they can wear their hats, back and forth and can do the work effectively. I don't know the answer, but something to think about, something to ask about, right? Because in commercial, it's all focused on label, whereas in medical, it is both on label as well as some other, proactive or reactive discussions, which are scientific exchange, right? And the third thing is also to look at, do we need all the 3 reviewers for every piece that comes through the process, right? I mean, do we need medical, legal, and regulatory for example, Congress decks, right? We just presented this data. We just presented as a poster or oral presentation. It went through whatever, authors' reviews and other things through its proper channel, right? Now, the same material is going on the decks for MSLs. Do we need all 3 people to review it or not? Or do we, a new product coming out or, is approved, or new indication is approved, do we need to send that email from both commercial and medical when there is a big overlap between the target audience, right? So I think asking these questions, redundancy, efficiency, as well as really respecting the time of people who are developing this content, that how can I partner with you to give you guidance up front, rather than you spend 4 weeks and then we say, no, this is not going to fly, right? So some things to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I can just follow up from Renu. So talking about who needs to see what, we got so far down that line, we'd like to be able to automate, but an interim step is what we developed something called an intent-based review macro. And it's a very simple 9-question macro in Excel. And it just asks the question, what's the content? How do you want to use it? And who do you want to use it? And with these questions, we then spits out, well, who needs to see this? And so if it's medical content with no product information on label, it's not brand colored, it's not going to be used by a sales rep, legal don't need to go anywhere near it, right? And so this is, and because we were trying to get consistency across the teams, where one team will say, oh no, legal absolutely need to see this, when they didn't really, and other teams who would try and squeeze it through with nobody seeing it. And so this was a way to harmonize beyond having a giant list. This is an MSL deck. This is a CVA. This is a website. The launch list would become too long. So I wanted to understand just content, channel, who's going to use it. Is it derivative? Because if you've approved it before, again, most of us don't need to see it. And it's been a very, very useful tool, I have to say. So yeah, that's kind of my input there.
Well, that's a great point. Great point. And I also would add one thing more is that sometimes we keep going in circles. Just keep trying to solve it, and there are different opinions, and it's difficult to just come on the same page. Escalate it. Have an escalation process. so that somebody else can then take a look and decide. I mean, just don't keep going in circles because, unless there is a objective way, which we talked about before, objective way of, there is a thing, this is what we're going to look at, these are the guidelines we're going to follow. And as Gareth said, really good that outline or those, checkpoints that we look at. But I think sometimes we just hesitate to escalate as if, we are going against somebody or we are, doing a disfavor. No, just all agree to disagree and escalate and find a solution. I think that's the goal rather than just making it inefficient and longer.
Yeah, and in our case, actually, Ren, to your point, we found out that early escalation actually saves time in the teams because everyone in the team is worried about time and for the leadership and how long it will take to schedule a meeting. Actually, we have seen cases where to your point, they went in circles for weeks and then we escalated 5 days later, we have a decision. And everybody also, they're much more aligned because the risk is taken by everyone. And that when we escalate, it goes to the senior leadership, which have much more understanding and much more power into making that decision of, as you said, Randy, before, what is the risk? How do we mitigate it? Can we take it? What is the opportunity there? So I think that really helped the teams understand also the leadership view on the risk. And so though initially we had more escalations and there was a faster turnover, over time, the teams realized and understood what leadership is comfortable with. And those escalations actually reduced over time. So that's another example that we've seen that has helped the MLR process overall.
Thank you so much for sharing all of these examples, use cases, some things that you have implemented within your organization. And these are varied, right? I see you spoke about determining the capacity of the team, how analytics could be used, versus increasing the adoption of global content, also ensuring that we reduce redundancies within the system. We try to triage the review in a particular way by assessing what kind of content is there, what kind of risk is there, and last but not the least, using the escalation matrix when it's needed, right? Don't wait until the end, but use it much ahead in time. So amazing use cases. I'm sure the listeners are going to get benefited from all of these, and probably they can take it back and implement within their settings as well. So building on that, what kind of emerging trends do you see influencing the future of MLR process, particularly with all the advancements that we see in data and analytics space and also in the technology space? Anybody would like to share? Yeah.
I mean, I can take that to start with. Maybe we're kind of heavy in that at the moment. So I'm working very closely with the IT team to look at this, and modular content obviously is a big leap forward, and really that understanding of packets of things that you approve and then can be plugged and played into templates for websites, for CVAs, for emails, etc., which is great, and it makes life easier on the reviewers. I think typically we underestimate the workload of upfront populating and approving such things, and when you're in launch phase, nobody wants to do that. The big one for me, I think, is trying to shoehorn AI into everything. And whilst AI content generation is one thing, AI approval is another. And so we've got a really excellent IT team here, and we've been probing the different tools and different things, but frankly, they're just not up to par yet. Not yet. They're more like glorified spell checkers at this point. It's very difficult. So we've had them try to just scan a document and pull out the core claims. It would just give us gobbledygook. So it's not saying that it's not there yet. And I think the thing to appreciate is that the regulatory bodies are at least 20 years behind us. So as fast as we do things, modular content is one thing, but we're already going to move into at point of contact content generation, right? I'm in front of a doctor and it's going to pull together my presentation for me, but the FDA still requires you to upload flat content for approval. So, we need the bodies to catch up. So yeah, I think there's a lot to come and it's exciting, but we are the guys looking at the rules around it, right? So.
Yeah, and Gareth, to your point, I don't think will ever be, at least in the foreseeable future, an AI approval. I think that is not what we have seen also from our side. But I think we, and I apologize for disagreeing a little bit here, but we have seen actually the Gen AI platform allow us a little bit more to do than, looking at grammatical errors or spelling errors. I think what we're seeing emerging is the technology where it can be what many even Microsoft calls the co-pilot environment, whereby AI will not approve documents for you. But we have seen cases where the technology can help you identify what could be risky. So obviously the models with ChatGPT and others with Gen AI depend on the environment and the documents you give them to train on to give you, obviously, to then analyze the documents you offer them. So what we are able to see is that it does understand regulations, so it can highlight why a statement could be risky. Obviously, I think actually it's a great opportunity, because what I feel we suffer within the organization at different levels is always the interpretation of the risk, right? You can see the compliance and legal team looking at the same paragraph of regulation and legislation, and the perceived risk can be very different. So I hope that technology can help us with more objective measures around what is the risk here, but also do a quick search and allow the large language models to help us with previous cases. For example, it would be great to be able to review content, see the risk based on the language used, and then not only state the regulation in place that's relevant, but also go back and say, well, those 3 companies have received letters and their case history matches what you're doing here. This is the perceived risk. So I think, obviously, the technology is not fully running yet. But from my side, I do see the potential of AI really improving the time to analysis, allowing people to not focus on the editorial elements of the document, but focus on the more strategic elements of, how does this meet regulation? Are we representing safety and efficacy in the right balanced way? The image we're using, is it appropriate, or are we using an image that's not appropriate? So I think technology is there to support us and help us. Definitely not yet move to automated approval and content generation in front of the customer. There's still a long way to go. I don't know, technology might surprise us in being faster than we think, but definitely not there. But definitely the co-pilot of review is something that we see technology can help us with.
Yeah, I think, as I said before, that I think AI, that genie has been out of the bottle and we won't be able to put it back, right? And we did a similar webinar on harnessing the power of AI in scientific publications. I very well attended one of the webinars we did, I think, in June or July time. And there also I said it that people who will embrace AI, they will replace people who will not embrace AI, right? We just saw 2 Nobel Prizes, physics and chemistry, both have some component of AI in there, right? So I don't think any of us even understand or comprehend where it is going to go. Will we even need MLR? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, right? Because at least in US, more than 50% of our HCPs by 2030 are going to be millennials or younger, who are tech savvy like nobody's business, right? Kind of thing. So I do think AI will play a big role, and hopefully it will keep improving, and we'll get to a point with what we are talking about in scientific publications as well, is help us submit materials, help us you do annotations, help us summarize whatever the discussion happened with the key points or the trends from so that we can go and implement, or if the changes were requested, it can go and check, which I know it can still do it to some extent even now, that were those changes made or not, right? So how can it bring efficiency in the process? But I don't think we can really comprehend how it is going to change the information communication, information sharing. Will there be a platform where anybody can go and with the power of AI get answers to their questions? Then do we need this? Do we need that? I don't know the answer to all that, but I think it's interesting times. I'm old enough to remember when internet came and how it changed our lives, right? So let's see what happens, with AI and how it changes the whole process and everything. But hopefully it will bring efficiency. But I must say that human engagement and human factor will stay. It's not going to disappear 100%. So technology and human, partnering to make it more efficient and more better. That's what I would say.
So I think this question has invited a lot of discussion, and I really see differing views. On one hand, I definitely see that there are technologies, but probably they're not the most optimal. On the other hand, we see that, probably we have to put in a lot of investment effort to develop it in a particular way so that it's useful. And Renu, to your point, what you're saying, that probably we're not able to imagine what can be the outcome of such technologies in future. So amazing views. And on that note, if I could ask another question, how do we assess if all of these innovations that probably are being brought in by organizations to improve the MLR process are actually effective or not? How do we assess the outcome of all of these innovative practices or technologies within the organization? Anybody would like to take?
Yeah, so I'll Rishita, take it, first crack at it, and then would, appreciate others to jump in. I think I always, whenever the question of effectiveness or question of success comes in, my goal is always to have end in mind, right? What are we trying to achieve? What is the objective of this piece? As I think both Gareth and Georges talked about, that, what are we trying to achieve? Well, who is the target audience? What are we communicating? And all that stuff is good. But I would take it even to a next higher level to talk about at least the main objective of many of these pieces is to communicate data or other information, right, with the quality pieces and in a timely fashion, right? That's the business objective, basically. So are we doing that, right? And in order to achieve that, are we having shorter review cycles? Are the submission up to the quality that we need, right? But I would also look at and make a feedback loop is, okay, 37, I have heard many times in accomplishments list, 37 pieces were reviewed and approved in, weeks or 4 days time for this launch or for this, indication or this kind of thing. How many of those pieces were used? How many times? And what kind of impact? If we are approving 37 and 20 of them just collected dust and didn't really go anywhere to make much of an impact, was that a good use of MLR time? Reviewers. Was that a good use of business? Was that a good use of resources, right? Kind of thing. So I would always start with end in mind and the business objective and take MLR to a little higher level, not just the review and efficiency and all, but is it meeting the business objective or not? And I'm sorry, I talk with my hands, I can't control.
Yeah. And just a bit of that, I think I totally agree. And I think how we talk about the innovative technologies and practices, actually we need to change a little bit our mindset of how we go about it. Two elements. First, that when we do pilots and smaller groups, we shouldn't wait until the solution is perfect. I think we as medical affairs professionals strive for perfection, but at times that is actually not helping us, whereby we take more and more time trying to iron out all the different elements and delay the process. So first of all, we need to change the mindset of release the product. If it's 80-90% what you're looking for, don't hold back, release it, because it will improve dramatically over the use by the actual users of the platform, rather than a smaller team trying to improve it incrementally on their own. And the second is, and I know it's very difficult as well, is fail fast. I think we don't do that. The times we see something is failing, we just try to revive it, try to make it survive, and try to make it successful. Well, probably it would be better to just say, sorry, that would not work. Let's go back to the other platform we had, or let's go back to the different process, the previous process. I think having the mindset of failing fast and releasing not 100% perfect solutions will go on a long way into this over this space, because if we stay behind and we don't have the speed it takes, we'll stay behind as an organization.
Those are amazing points, and I do understand, from what you said, defining the end goals, defining the review outcomes, and George's, to your point, do experiments quickly, fail fast, and move on to the next one. These are some amazing points to how do you assess, all of these innovative practices are actually yielding results or not. Honestly, I can go on, and I can ask 5 to 6 more questions because the discussion is extremely interesting, but I'm also looking at the time, and we'll probably have to wrap up the discussion soon. So one last question to all the panel members, and if you could give very crisp responses before we end the session. So what are your parting thoughts on, data-driven approach towards reimagining or reinventing the MLR process? Any parting thoughts from all of you?
Yeah, I can start. I firmly believe that MLR is unique, and we are uniquely positioned to utilize technology in our processes and be able to enable and train our teams to be successful. I think by having digital dexterity and training of our teams, it will help them adopt those cutting-edge technologies and tools, and we make sure that we really equip our teams to handle the complexities of the modern and future regulatory environments with the precision and the efficiency that we all strive within medical affairs.
Thanks.
Yeah. And I would say 3 things, in my closing remarks. First is that it's a critical process, right? It's a very critical, MLR is a very critical process. But I would say embrace innovation and technology. There's no way out. We have to kind of get on board with that. And the second thing I would say is that MLR is in order to make it objective and in order to make it clear to everybody, stakeholders, is everybody in the company who's engaged with or involved in, as you said, Gareth, your organization chart, your submitters, your content developers, everybody should have a clear understanding of what is company's risk tolerance, right? Where are we going with that, right? Kind of thing. If you try to push a piece and the company is very low risk tolerance, you're just wasting your time, right? So, and third thing I would say is everybody should be clear on objective criteria, that how we're going to look at which are the FDA guidelines we follow, which are the other, promotion review things we follow. It's right, very clear, and everybody can kind of understand that process rather than scratching your head. Where did that come from? And I think Gareth said it very right. The 2 people look at the same piece and come up with different assessments, right? That shouldn't happen in a company. We all should be on the same page. I'll leave it up to you, Gareth, to close it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not too much to add there for both of your discussion. I would say from my side, try not to have as many layers of MLR. So pharma companies tend to have a global MLR, and then Europe takes it and they tweak a little bit. So you have to put it back through review. And then Germany takes it and says, thanks very much, but we can't use that. So they do a little process. So we're really trying to do MLR at the point of use, do it as close to the customer as possible, with as few layers as possible. So then your metrics will really reflect what's going on. It won't be clouded by many, many layers of people seeing something. And hopefully it should be faster, right? So just, reduce down your layers. That's what I would say.
No, so thank you so much, panel members. Amazing discussion. You all have been phenomenal. I'll also like to thank all the audience who have joined. Thank you for joining and listening in. I hope you found the discussion today useful. I'll let all of you say goodbye, and yeah, that's all from my side. Thank you. Good day, everyone.
Thank you, Vesta. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But